Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing fine. And today I'm going to be showing you some of the CDs I've been listening to recently. These were all picked at random from my collection, and some of these I've not listened to for quite a while. Okay, first up we've got Jefferson Airplane Volunteers, and this is on the RCA BMG Heritage label. And it's their sixth album. It was recorded in 1969. I'm immediately struck by the superior musicianship. There's a dedication to their craft from the songwriting right through to the production. Guest musicians add to the feel of the album rather than detracting from the almost telepathic interplay between the six core members. So for example, you've got English musician Nicky Hopkins adding his dynamic piano to complement the two guitarists, and I find myself really being drawn to his piano playing. You've also got Jerry Garcia, who appears on the track playing The Farm, and he plays pedal steel on that track. The highlight for me is Wooden Ships, with Paul Kantner's evocative lyrics about being free on the ocean. It's interesting to compare Jefferson Airplane's version with the version on Crosby, Stills and Nash's debut album. You also get 5 bonus tracks, as you can see there. These were recorded live at the Fillmore East in November 1969, and the sound quality is really good on those. Right, next up it is Lou Reed by Lou Reed, and this is on the RCA label, and it was his first album after leaving the Velvet Underground, and you get here re-recordings of 8 Velvet Underground tracks which hadn't appeared on record at that time. They eventually came out in the 1990s on the albums VU and Another View. The production, I must say, is rather flat. It almost sounds like demos at times, but you've got some quality English musicians on here. You've got Caleb Quaye from Elton John's band, and you've got Steve Howe and Rick Wakeman from Yes, of course. It's all very polite, and I Can't Stand It, for example, which sounds fantastic on the Velvet Underground version. It's all a bit lacking in edge and lacking in any danger whatsoever. Next up, it's the debut album by the dB's, and it's called Stands For Decibels, and this came out on the I.R.S. label in 1981. They were an influence on the Paisley Underground bands that came just after them, and also on quite a few of the 1980s American college rock acts. I'm thinking here especially of R.E.M. Having 2 singer-songwriters in the band really helps sustain interest throughout the tracks, and there's lots of 60s pop influences here, and you get some Rickenbacker guitar and acetone organ, for example. And next we have Hutson by Leroy Hutson. This comes in a nice little digipack. And this was Leroy Hutson's 3rd solo album, and it was released originally in 1975. Prior to this, he'd been the lead singer in the Impressions on just for 1 album. Curtis Mayfield was certainly nurturing his talent at this time, and the backing musicians include most of Curtis Mayfield's backing band at that time. It's a good example, I think, of mid-70s soul, and you've got a good horn section on there and female backing vocalists as well. The soul ballads So Much Love and I Bless the Day are a good place to start if you're not aware of any of his other tracks. Next up, it's a various artist compilation, pet projects, the Brian Wilson Productions, and this was put out on the Ace label. Despite his manic work rate in the mid-60s, working obviously with the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson still found time to do some outside productions. You get the usual excellent job on the Ace label. You've got a beautiful 20-page booklet included, and the tracks are also taken from the original masters. I'll just show you a couple of pages from the booklet. Right, a highlight for me on this album is Guess I'm Dumb, which is one of Brian Wilson's strongest songs. It's produced in a Bacharach, David, Walker Brothers, Righteous Brothers style, and Glenn Campbell does his best impersonation of the high register Brian Wilson vocals. Also on here you've got The Laughing Gravy, which is Dean Torrance after Jan Berry's car accident, and you've also got a couple of tracks by the Survivors, and both The Laughing Gravy and Survivors include vocals by Brian Wilson. Next up, it's the John Peel Sessions by the Moondogs, and it's on the Detour label. And the Moondogs are fondly remembered by me for their children's TV series from 1981 called Moondogs Matinee. What you get here are the first two radio sessions that they recorded for the John Peel show on BBC Radio 1, and the first session is just magical. It shows a youthful exuberance which it shares with all the other acts that were on Terry Hooley's Northern Ireland record label, Good Vibrations, at that time. Schoolgirl Crush, Who's Gonna Tell Mary, Talking in the Canteen, and Roddy's Gang all have relentless drumming and timeless lyrics which could almost have been written by Jerry Goffin back in the 1950s. Who's Gonna Tell Mary in particular is a power pop masterpiece. It's almost like a script for a film to rival Gregory's Girl, and all in under 3 minutes. Roddy's Gang pulls off the same trick. It's utterly perfect guitar pop. One of the gang has gone steady, so the rest of the gang are concerned that it's going to be the end of late nights and gang fights for the rest of them. Moving on, we've come to Joe Bataan and St. Latin's Day Massacre, and this is on the Fania label. His English vocals on the soul ballads I Wish You Love Part 1 and If I Were a King are as smooth as any 70s artist you can name. If I Were a King also has classic 60s style soul backing vocals and also touches of brass which adds to it. And the album ends with a suitably raucous percussion driven version of Isaac Hayes' theme from Shaft. Next up, it's the FLESHTONES and Powerstance, and this was put out on the Big Beat label, and I think it came in about 1991. These are, for me, one of the great New York garage rock guitar bands, and they got their start, I think, in about 1976, and played CBGBs in New York at that time. They joined for this album by another New York legend, Andy Chernoff, the bassist and songwriter with the Dictators. There's real Hoodoo Gurus feel to the album, especially on I'm Still Thirsty, where the drumming and choruses are designed to really get you moving. I then checked the sleeve and noticed that the producer's Dave Faulkner from the Hoodoo Gurus, so it's no real surprise that his devotion to pop melody has influenced the band on this album. And moving on, we come to Paul BEVOIR with The Family Way and The Happiest Days of Your Life, and this is on the Tangerine label. This is another artist fondly remembered by me. He was the guitarist and the songwriter in the Jet Set in the first half of the 1980s. As a side project whilst he was still with the Jet Set in 1985. If you like the British Toy Town sound of the late 1960s, think in particular here of Keith West's excerpts from a teenage opera and some of John Pantry's singles which were recorded on a shoestring. I think you'll really love this. There's a melancholy nostalgia for an almost mythical England. The charm is in the little details which are included within the lyrics. So there's references, for example, to the chimes of Big Ben at News at 10, morning paper rounds, corner shops, the Salvation Army, and also overflowing window boxes on Vale Row in suburbia. And next we have Old, New, Borrowed and Blue by Slade, and this is on the Salvo label, This was their fourth album. It was recorded in 1973, and the songwriting partnership of Noddy Holder and Jim Lee is really starting to develop here, I think, and reveal a Beatlesque sensitivity to their songwriting. Every Day, I think, is so touching. The simple piano accompaniment and Holder's understated vocals have the same impact for me as some of McCartney's best material. Also of interest on here, I think, is Miles Out to Sea, which is a mid-tempo delight with some chiming electric guitars. And even the first single off the album, My Friend Stan, isn't their normal stomp your feet rocker. There's an earworm tune which lends itself to being idly hummed as you walk down the street. Next, it's Harry and Nilsson Sings Newman by Harry Nilsson. And Harry was his third album, and it came out in 1969. And Nilsson Sings Newman was his fourth album, and that came out in 1970. Harry betrays a fondness for Timpan Alley, a trait which he shares with Randy Newman. Nobody Cares About the Railroad Anymore, Morning Glory Story, and I Guess the Lord Must Be in New York City are for me the pick of the originals on this album. Ella Fitzgerald took her shine to Open Your Window, and Barbra Streisand covered Maybe on her album Stony End, which was her tribute to the new generation of songwriters that were emerging in the late 60s, early 70s. Nilsson Sings Newman, the other album on this CD, is a favourite of mine. Randy Newman plays the piano on all the tracks, and Nilsson's multi-tracked backing vocals are the real highlight for me on this album. Love Story, Yellow Man, and Dayton, Ohio, 1903 are pure genius from Randy Newman, the songwriter, and Nilsson, the singer. And next up, it's Toothpaste 2000 and Instant Action. And this was on the Parasol label. And it's their fifth album from 2002. They were led by Frank Bednash and Donna Esposito, who'd previously recorded as Cowboy and Spin Girl. And I can remember a single that got put out here in the UK on the Subway label. The alternating male and female lead vocals and the 60s influenced pop songs, which are delivered with real early new wave energy and abandon, certainly keep you interested throughout all the tracks. Donna Esposito's vocals on the tracks That Kind of Love and Too Young to Know particularly impressed me. And next up we've got Laura Nyro and New York Tendaberry. And this was Nyro's third album, and it came out in 1969. At the heart is Nyro's piano and her New York vocals, which are steeped in the soul of the city. The title track was surely a clarion call to Joni Mitchell to up her game. And I suspect that Kate Bush was also influenced by Laura Nyro. You certainly have to be in the right mood for these albums, as they're not certainly not easy listening, and they require your full attention. And it does repay a close attention to the songs, I must say. And next up, it's Mind Games, John Lennon, and this is on the EMI label. And it's his fourth studio album from 1973, produced by John Lennon, whereas the previous three albums had all been produced by Phil Spector, although his influence in the production style is certainly noticeable on some of the tracks. Meat City, Tight As and the title track are the best for me. Elsewhere there's a lot of navel gazing, addressing his feelings towards Yoko Ono, which I can probably do without. And moving on, we've got The Early Years, 1967-1972 creation by Pink Floyd, and comes in a digipack. and it's a 2 CD distillation of the early years box set, that really expensive box set that came out a few years ago now. I'll deal with the negatives first. The liner notes are just a bland, brief retelling of the Pink Floyd story up to 1972, rather than giving you any details whatsoever on the origins of the previously unreleased tracks. Too many of the tracks on here are just new mixes of well-known album tracks, but there are, I must say, some wonderful previously unreleased songs on here, and the sound quality is excellent. So, for example, In the Beechwoods, which is a track that I wasn't aware of, it's a Syd Barrett instrumental, and it was recorded at the sessions for The Saucerful of Secrets. And also you get a live version recorded at Montreux of Atom Heart Mother, with just the band playing rather than having a brass band backing, and that's pretty impressive, I must say. Okay, that's what I've been listening to, so please let me know your comments, and let me know what you've been listening to as well, and hopefully I will be back again quite soon, so take care.